Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something huge, something that affects pretty much everyone in the UK. Property. Imagine having 2.89 trillion pounds. What would you even do with that? Well, that's roughly the amount of property wealth held by baby boomers. Our deep dive today focuses on this great generational property divide. We're looking squarely at the boomers, born roughly 1946 to 64, and how they amassed this incredible wealth. We'll dig into some, pretty surprising facts on what it all means for the housing market and for you.
That's exactly right. Just to set the stage, we're talking about an estimated 2.89 trillion property wealth held by UK baby boomers by 2025. And that figure, it represents something like 56% of all owner-occupied housing wealth in the UK.
56%.
Yeah. So straight away, you see this massive generational gap opening up.
Okay, so our mission today is clear. Let's try and understand how this happened, the factors behind it, where this wealth actually sits, and crucially, what it means for the future, for the housing market going forward, and, for our listeners trying to navigate it all. Right, let's get into it. When you look at that 2.89 trillion pounds, what was the sort of historical advantages? How did boomers actually build this up? It feels like a totally different time economically.
Oh, it absolutely was. The biggest factor, affordability.
Hmm.
Simple as that, really. Back in the 60s, the 70s, you were often looking at house prices maybe 3 times the average yearly salary.
This is 3 times compared to now.
Exactly. Compare that to 2025, where it's, 7, maybe 8 times average earnings. It's a huge difference. Let me give you a concrete example. 1970, average UK house price was about £4,000.
4,000 pounds.
And the median salary, around £1,200.
Wow. Just unthinkable today for most young people, buying on 3 times salary.
Completely. But that was the reality. So boomers could get onto the ladder early, and then they just rode this wave of, decades of pretty relentless house price growth, especially in places like London, the Southeast. You've seen prices jump over 500% since the 1980s. Those modest houses became gold mines.
Okay, so they bought cheap and prices rocketed.
Mm-hmm.
But were there other things helping them along beyond just that initial low price point?
Yes, definitely. Mortgage conditions were much more favorable back then. You had things like interest-only mortgages, widely available, meaning lower monthly payments, though you weren't paying off the capital. And lending standards were just looser. Getting loans of 4 or 5 times your salary, sometimes with really small deposits, was possible.
Right, much easier access to the finance needed.
Exactly. And then you layer on government policy. The big one everyone remembers is the Right to Buy scheme in the 80s.
Ah, yes, right to buy. That allowed council tenants
to buy their council homes, often at a really significant discount. So that transferred a lot of public housing assets into private hands, boosting homeownership rates for that generation.
Interesting. So, right to buy helped boomers get on the ladder, but looking back, did it contribute to today's housing supply problems by reducing social housing stock?
Well, that's the criticism, yes. By selling off council housing without replacing it at the same rate, it definitely contributed to the shortage of affordable social housing we see now. And it wasn't just policy, there was a cultural shift too. Homeownership became deeply ingrained as, a major life goal, a symbol of success. So you put all that together, and the result is pretty stark. Boomers today hold homes worth about £2.95 trillion. But here's the kicker. They only have about $60 billion in outstanding mortgage debt on that. That's just 2%.
Only 2% debt. That's incredible financial freedom.
It is. Now compare that to younger generations. They hold maybe $600 billion in property value, but they're carrying $300 billion in mortgage debt. That's 50% debt.
Half their property value is debt. A completely different financial reality.
Completely different. The burden is just so much higher.
Okay, let's really try and grasp the scale of this 2.89 trillion boomer wealth. It's such a vast number. How does it break down?
Yeah, it's hard to get your head around. Savills did some research on this. Owner-occupiers aged 60 and over control that 2.89 trillion in net housing wealth. So, after mortgage debt. And get this. Just the over 75s alone hold nearly a quarter of that, about $676 billion.
Just the over 75s. Wow.
So contrast that with the under 35s. They hold just 6% of the total owner-occupied wealth, about $174 billion.
6% versus, the huge chunk held by older generations. The disparity is massive.
It really is.
And where is this wealth geographically? Is it all piled up in London and the Southeast?
A lot of it is, yes, in terms of sheer value. The Southeast leads over 60s there, have about $603 billion in housing equity. London's next with $400 billion, then the east of England with $354 billion. But if you look at the proportion of homeowners who are boomers, it's actually highest in the Southwest, and Wales about 49%, places popular for retirement.
Ah, that makes sense. And lowest in London.
Lowest in London, yeah, around 38%, probably due to the younger population profile and, well, the sheer cost of property there pushing out older demographics sometimes.
Okay, so it's mainly their own homes. Or is there more to it?
There's definitely more. This wealth isn't just in the homes they live in. Here's a fascinating point. Boomers aged 50 to 64 are actually the UK's biggest group of private landlords.
Really? Biggest landlord group.
Yes, they hold about 679 billion in private rental sector equity, and the over 65s own another 405 billion worth of rental properties.
So they own their own homes, often with little debt, and a huge chunk of the rental market.
Exactly. It creates this compounding effect. Just over the last 10 years, the housing wealth of the over 65s grew by over 1.1 trillion.
£1 trillion in a decade.
Just from housing wealth growth for that age group. It shows the power of owning property long-term through that boom period.
Right, so we have this picture of incredible wealth concentration among boomers. But on the flip side, let's talk about the younger generations, millennials, Gen Z. It sounds like they're facing a completely different reality.
Oh, completely. That affordability boomers enjoyed, it's basically a distant memory for millennials and Gen Z. There was an ONS report, Office for National Statistics. It showed only 41% of 25 to 34-year-olds own their home in 2021.
41%. How does that compare historically?
Well, back in 1991, it was 67% for the same age group.
That's a huge drop, from two-thirds down to less than half.
It is, and the barriers are just immense now. You've got soaring prices, average UK house around £290,000 in 2025. Median earnings maybe £35,000. Plus, much stricter lending rules after the 2008 financial crisis.
Right, the affordability checks are much tougher.
Much tougher. Add in wages that haven't really kept pace, and often significant student debt. And suddenly, saving that 10%, maybe 20% deposit that lenders want, it's become almost impossible for many young people without help.
And if you can't buy, you're renting. What impact does this have on the rental market and those stuck in it?
Well, it puts huge pressure on the rental market. High demand means high rents, which then makes it even harder to save a deposit. It's a vicious cycle. In London, for example, renters can easily spend 40% of their income just on rent.
40%, leaving very little room to save.
Precisely. Which brings us to the bank of mom and dad.
Ah, yes, parental help. How significant is that now?
It's become critical. Legal in General reckons it supports about a quarter of all property transactions in the UK now.
A quarter, funded mainly by boomer wealth, presumably.
Largely, yes. Equity release, savings, inheritance advances. It's often boomer housing wealth being recycled down. But while it's a lifeline for those who can access it, it massively deepens inequality. If your parents don't own property or can't help, you're left much further behind.
So it's creating a two-tier system even within younger generations.
Absolutely. Your ability to buy is increasingly linked to your parents' wealth, not just your own earnings. Now, looking ahead, people talk about this huge intergenerational wealth transfer coming maybe 5.5 trillion cores over the next couple of decades, mostly property wealth flowing to millennials and Gen Z.
That sounds like it could solve the problem.
Well, it offers hope for some, but the key thing is it's going to be very unevenly distributed. It won't land equally. So rather than fixing the inequality, it might actually entrench it further, benefiting those whose parents already own significant assets. It really makes social mobility much harder based on individual merit alone.
That's a really crucial point. It's not just about the amount, but who gets it.
Exactly. Without that family help, would homeownership rates for young people just collapse?
It seems plausible. You mentioned L&G considers the Bank of Mom and Dad a top 10 lender.
That's right. Take that away, and a huge chunk of first-time buyers simply couldn't buy. The market relies on it now, which is quite telling.
Okay, let's switch focus slightly. We know boomers own these valuable assets, often large family homes. The English Housing Survey found millions of homes with spare bedrooms earned by pensioners. Yet they seem reluctant to downsize. Why is that? What keeps them these larger properties?
There are a few big reasons. Firstly, there's often a strong emotional attachment. It's the family home, full of memories. Leaving is hard.
Understandable.
Secondly, there's often a lack of suitable alternatives. Where do they move to? There isn't a huge supply of appealing, purpose-built retirement housing in the right locations.
Right, the options aren't always there or attractive.
And thirdly, the financial incentive often isn't strong enough. Once you factor in stamp duty, legal fees, moving costs, downsizing might not actually free up as much cash as you'd think.
So the costs of moving eat into the equity released.
Precisely. Savills found that while boomers are 44% of homeowners, they were only 18.5% of buyers last year. That means only about 1 in 57 boomer homeowners actually moved house.
1 in 57 to really staying put.
Largely, yes. Which leads to this situation often described as asset-rich, cash-poor.
Asset-rich, cash-poor, meaning they own a valuable house but might struggle with day-to-day living costs.
Exactly. Pensions might be stretched, especially with rising costs. So the house is valuable, but the wealth isn't liquid. That's why we've seen a big rise in equity release mortgages, borrowing against the house value without moving. It was up by about a third in early 2025.
Accessing cash without selling up.
Yes, often to supplement income, or maybe to gift money to children or grandchildren, feeding back into that bank of mom and dad.
It's a complex picture. And you mentioned the English Housing Survey finding nearly 10 million homes with at least 2 spare bedrooms, mostly owned by pensioners.
That's right. And that underoccupation leads to policy discussions, like the Tony Blair Institute suggesting changes to council tax, maybe taxing larger homes based on current value to encourage downsizing.
A sort of spare room tax for owner-occupiers.
Well, effectively, yes, something like 0.5% of the current value. But these ideas always face huge political backlash. Boomers are a very powerful voting group, and they tend to resist policies seen as targeting their property wealth.
Okay, so boomers are largely staying put in valuable, often under-occupied homes. Younger generations are struggling. What are the wider consequences of all this? For the economy, for society?
The ripple effects are pretty significant. Economically, it clearly fuels wealth inequality. Younger people struggle to build assets while existing wealth concentrates and grows. Socially, it hampers mobility. Homeownership has always been a key way for people to build stability and progress financially. If that becomes mainly dependent on inheritance, it fundamentally changes the social contract.
And the rental market.
The rental market gets squeezed even harder. More demand from those locked out of buying pushes up rents, making life tougher, especially for younger people and those on lower incomes.
You mentioned social media chatter, people predicting a crash when boomers eventually, well, pass on or downsize en masse.
Yeah, you see those predictions? Some ex-posts talk about 13, 14 million boomers potentially exiting homeownership by the mid-2030s, flooding the market.
Is that realistic? A sudden flood?
Probably not a sudden flood. It's important to have some nuance here. This transfer won't happen overnight. Many boomers will live in their homes for a long time. The wealth transfer will be gradual, mostly through inheritance over decades. And without policy changes, as we said, it might just reinforce inequality, not fix it.
Right. And it all connects back to the basic supply issue too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Even if more homes came onto the market from downsizing, we still have a fundamental problem of not building enough new homes. We build maybe 150,000 a year. The target is 300,000.
So even releasing existing stock doesn't solve the underlying shortage.
Exactly. High demand chasing limited supply keeps prices high, regardless of these generational factors.
Okay, so given this complex web of issues, wealth concentration, affordability crisis, lack of supply, what can actually be done, what are the potential policy solutions being floated?
Well, there's no single magic bullet, obviously, but several areas need action. Top of the list has to be increasing housing supply.
Building more houses. Easier said than done.
Much easier said than done. It means tackling planning restrictions, finding ways to deal with high land costs, fundamental long-term challenges.
Okay, supply first. What else?
Tax reforms are always discussed. Things like adjusting inheritance tax, maybe introducing a proper land value tax, ways to potentially redistribute some of that property wealth.
Politically tricky, though, as you said. Alienating boomers.
Very tricky. Then there are incentives specifically designed to encourage downsizing. More attractive retirement housing options, maybe stamp duty exemptions or reductions for those selling large family homes.
Trying to nudge behavior.
Exactly. And finally, direct help for first-time buyers. Things like shared ownership schemes, maybe government-backed or subsidized mortgages.
Like Help to Buy, though you mentioned that had mixed results.
Yes, the risk with demand-side subsidies like Help to Buy is that they can just push up prices if supply doesn't increase alongside them. So the results have been debated.
It's clearly a minefield. In this situation, with huge sums involved, complex family dynamics, tax implications, How important is getting good financial advice?
Oh, it's becoming absolutely crucial for both generations. For boomers, wealth managers and estate planners are essential to navigate things like inheritance tax planning, using trusts, lifetime gifting, making tax-efficient investments to pass wealth on effectively.
Minimizing the tax hit, basically.
Essentially, yes. And for the younger generation receiving inheritances, advice is vital on how to manage potentially large lump sums, how to invest it, how to use it toward their own financial goals, like buying a home.
So professional guidance is key at both ends of the transfer.
Definitely. And we are seeing the market respond in other ways, too. Real estate forecasts for 2025 mention the growth of build-to-rent schemes.
Purpose-built rental developments.
Yes, offering professional management, longer tenancies perhaps, and things like co-living spaces are emerging, especially in cities, for younger renters.
So alternatives are appearing, but is homeownership still the main goal?
For most people, yes, I think it remains the aspiration. It's seen as the bedrock of long-term financial security in the UK. These alternatives help manage the current situation, but don't necessarily replace the desire to own.
So wrapping this up, this deep dive really hammers home the sheer scale of boomer property wealth, that 2.89 trillion pounds. It's a result of fortunate timing, favorable conditions, but it undeniably casts this long shadow over millennials and Gen Z trying to get onto the ladder today.
That's the core issue, isn't it? House prices are just run so far ahead of wages, locking younger generations out. It genuinely threatens social mobility and fairness. And while that massive 5.5 trillion wealth transfer is coming down the track, it won't be a silver bullet. As we've discussed, it risks making inequality even worse unless we see real policy intervention. It just underlines the need for action. Building more homes, seriously looking at ways to encourage downsizing, and finding effective ways to support first-time buyers to try and rebalance things.
A complex challenge with no easy answers. So, a final thought for you, our listener. What are your thoughts on this huge generational wealth gap? How does it shape your own view of the housing market? And maybe more importantly, what steps do you think are most vital to start bridging this divide? Plenty to think about there. We hope you'll continue exploring these powerful forces shaping all our futures.